So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Samantha Hendricks. I am the event coordinator here at Schuler Books and Nicholas Books. We've got 3 locations in Grand Rapids, Lansing, and in Ann Arbor. Tonight, we are talking to kids about race. This event was prompted by a book that came through our Chapbook Press by Anissa. We are so excited to be able to do this evening, and Anissa put together this amazing panel, which we're going to hear from this evening as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody, and then Kendra McNeil of We Are Lit is going to host and moderate the conversation. So without further ado, Anissa Eddie is the founder and principal consultant with Luminality Consulting. Through her consulting practice, she offers support in the areas of project management, process facilitation, strategic planning, coaching, and training. Her work focuses on early childhood systems, building, and policy. She's also pursuing a PhD in child development at MSU. She's interested in leveraging research to inform public policy in order to increase equitable outcomes for children and families, particularly within the context of birth justice, identity development, race, socialization, and social detriments of health. Anissa lives here in Grand Rapids with her partner and their 3 kids. Hi, Anissa. Thanks for joining us. We have Piper. Oh my gosh, why can't I do this? Piper Adonya.
You got it.
Yes. Ah, yes. And I got myself all worked up. Is an award-winning illustrator, visual storyteller, and designer. She is passionate about amplifying voices, nerding out on research-based illustration and design, and creating works that tell a story. Whether she is drawing a portrait of an individual who has shaped history or hand lettering an editorial social justice post, she uses illustration and design to educate, inspire conversation, and make complex social justice related issues easier to comprehend and work through. Thanks for joining us, Piper. We have Gloria Lara, who has extensive experience in leadership positions in both the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. A native of LA, she received a BA in business administration, specifically accounting, from California State University, Fullerton, and a Master of Business Administration from Harvard Business School. She held executive level positions at major corporations during her over 20 years in the corporate world. Thanks for joining us, Gloria. And last but not least, our facilitator this evening is Kendra McNeil, the founder, curator, and owner of We Are Lit. Her work focuses on creating a culture around books and developing programs around long-term community-based literary initiatives. She is the Chief Operating Officer and City of Grand Rapids Neighborhood Match Project Leader for the Black Book Exchange Box, a nonprofit organization and book exchange system dedicated to the thoughtful representation of Black people in art, culture, and literature. Whew. We have some amazing people on this panel this evening, everyone, and I'm so excited for you to hear from them. I'm going to hand it over now to Kendra. Like I said, drop your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to them shortly. Thank you, ladies.
Hi, good evening, everyone. First, I just want to thank Schuler's and Nicola Books and Chapbook Press for putting this panel together and hosting us this evening. That first, and I'm just really excited to be here and to get into this conversation around such an important topic and such a great work from some ladies from the community. So glad to be here. So kind of what we're gonna do tonight, we're going to start with, I'm going to start with Gloria because Gloria, as you learned in the introduction, is the executive director of LITA, and that is the origins of talking to kids about race. And so Gloria, if you would not mind just giving us a little background about LITA and your work there, and then just kind of tell us about how talking to kids about race started.
Well, thank you, Kendra, and I'm really pleased and excited to be here. I was accused as a young child of being a bookworm, so to me, books are amazing because they can help you learn and also escape. So yeah, they're great.
Yeah, and now the tables are turned because you interviewed me at one point, and so now I get the
Right.
pleasure of,
I was
getting into a conversation with you.
right. I was reflecting on that. So LEDA, which is Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, is based in Holland, Michigan, but we provide our services throughout all of the west side of the state, and we're expanding to other parts of the state as well, and sometimes other states. We were founded 25 years ago and what we do is we build bridges between different groups of people to help people understand each other. We do this by workshops, right now specifically on implicit bias, where we actually take people, organizations, boards of directors through sessions and trying to understand and come to common definitions and understandings. We're also have an annual summit every year where we have usually over 700 people. During the virtual days, we had 700 last year and 400 this year, talking specifically with some keynote speakers on current topics as well as workshops. But what we're most proud of is our work with children. And one of our major programs is called Calling All Colors, where we have middle and high school students that gather together in a summit basis at the beginning of the school year. They have speakers, and then they break off into their different school groups during the school year and make projects about inclusivity, equity, et cetera, within their schools. And then they present them to us at the end of the school year. But LEDA was founded 25 years ago, and that was in 1996. But it became evident that there was really a need to talk to children about race. Children start, and Anissa is really, she'll be talking about the theory and all that about that. But what we ended up is putting together a workshop and then a book. This was our original book, just very basic, talking to kids about race. It's published in the year 2000. I mean, we have things like, coloring books, and it's just a total of just 19 pages. We decided about 2 years ago, I believe, Anissa, to actually more than 2 years, 2.5, 3 years ago, to update the book. And we were fortunate and lucky enough to meet up with Anissa, who's really focused on that. So we actually came up with this book, Talking to Kids About Race. And it's very specific with gorgeous illustrations. Thank you, Piper. Whoops, there we go. So, I mean, and what it does is it's an introductory guide to building foundations for racial equity in early childhood. Our target audience are parents, early childhood educators, the general public. A lot of grandparents are interested in this because as children start seeing different things on the news, or they can't help but hear their parents or their peers talk about things, many people come to us and say, I want to talk to my kids, but I don't want to do it in a way that will harm them, or I want to do it in a way that they will be able to understand and that's age appropriate. So that's what we did. So I think it's probably, unless you have any other questions, it's time for Anissa.
Yeah, well, I do want to ask you one question. If you could just speak perhaps a little bit to some of the outcomes that you may be aware of people who have participated in the workshop.
So the outcomes, and the parents and the grandparents feel a lot more confident when they talk to their children. When you're talking about something, especially to your children, that you really don't know the answer to, most of the time you get, well, we'll talk about that later, or that's not we're not going to discuss that. So children start thinking that there's something wrong with talking about someone's skin color, or why someone's hair is different, or why someone looks different, or why someone speaks differently, or why someone doesn't even understand English. So what this book does is it enables the parents, the adult, to be able to speak a little bit more confidently and to hope that, it opens up the discussion with the child. So you can question them or they can question you. And as they get older, they start realizing that there's different avenues and different ways to think about it, but it doesn't become a closed subject.
Yeah. And I guess my final question for you, Gloria, before I bring Anissa in is, you mentioned earlier that Lita does work with leadership within companies and things like that. Was there something specific that was brought to the organization that prompted the need to develop a workshop for children? Maybe feedback from the community? How did the organization determine that in addition to the work that it was already doing at an adult level, it needed something for children as well?
Well, that was way before my time, but
Okay.
but one of the things that we do is we're always responsive to our communities, to the people that attend our workshops. And I believe that we could sense that there was this discomfort about, well, this is fine, I'm learning all about this, but what do I tell my children?
Yeah.
And right now we also work with a lot of educational institutions, a lot of the school districts, schools, and ISDs as well. So we're quite busy with all that as well. So the teachers and the staff and the educators are also learning about equity. And we also are putting workshops together for early childhood education as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Anissa, I want to come to you now. And as we learned that talking to kids about race started as a workshop and that there was already a workbook in play, if you can just share with the audience how you came into the project and how it evolved to the update that we have
Sure.
now.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Kendra. So happy to be here and talk about this. It's really been a passion project from the beginning. But the way that I came into this, I was doing an early childhood fellowship through the Pritzker Children's Initiative. And so my work was really focused on early childhood systems building and policy and advocacy around the infant toddler population in particular. And for this fellowship, it was a 2-year fellowship, we needed to do a capstone project. And the interim executive director, even before Gloria was there, had come to me and just said, I know you're kind of interested in this topic, and I wonder if you might help us update this content for the workshop and make some edits and updates to the workbook. So originally I was thinking this would be perfect for this capstone project and I could do it all in my work time. And also it would give me some preparation as I was considering applying to a PhD program. And I knew this was an area I was interested in researching. But the fellowship changed the criteria and decided that that wouldn't count as a project. But once I had started to get into it, I couldn't let it go. I had conversations with Piper. She was excited about the illustrations. I had people in my mind that I wanted to pull in. And so I just decided to continue to pursue it on my own time and really create the project from there. As Gloria came into the organization, when we talked about it, it was clearly a priority that she wanted to see finished and was really willing to collaborate and work with me on that, even though I had to adjust the time frame. And so we decided to go all in. Originally, it was going to be maybe some minor updates, data points, things like that, but we felt the hunger for this kind of content. And we wanted it to be a book that could exist within the workshop model with Lita, but also be widely accessible to others as well. And then partnering with Schuler was an amazing way to get it printed here locally and make it available.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your passion for racial equity work. And in the previous conversation that you had around the book, you made the comment about your passion around helping children to understand their self-worth, and then also that your interest in proactively addressing the consequences of racism. And so if you can just talk to us a little bit about your passion for racial equity work, and not just within the scope of the book, but just what you're working on now.
Definitely. So for me, I think it's really important to be grounded in your why. And I had heard Dr. Gail Christopher speak at a conference a while back, and she said a sentence that really spelled out for me my why. And that was that there is no hierarchy of human value. And I just feel like that's such a core concept that I try to approach my relationships with and my work with. And when I think about the hierarchies that do exist and that are embedded in our systems and the harm that they cause, it's something that makes me upset and makes me feel driven to do work. But at the same time, early childhood has been the focus of my professional work for a long time. And when I started to put the pieces together, recognizing that especially in the infant and toddler years, that's the most rapid period of brain development. That first 3 years of life, so much of the foundation is laid at that time. And even though we have amazing programs and initiatives that help us to learn about our implicit bias and unlearn things or relearn history that we were misguided or misinformed on, I felt like there was a lack of proactive effort of when these biases are first developing and when concepts of what race means or categorizations of all kinds of difference that leads to isms that are harmful are first starting in the minds of children. And so that's where I wanted to intersect my own passion for equity on all aspects, but specifically within early childhood. And then adults come into the picture because we are the ones that are helping to socialize and shape and guide the learning and development of children. So educating the adults is very much impacting young children in this work.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Piper, first I want to share just, I always hate to say that I have favorites illustrations because they're all good, but this one I just love a whole lot. And I know, again, from hearing other commentary that Anissa has given on the project, that she talks with a lot of passion about having you a part of the project. And so one of the things that that I've heard her say is that she knew that you would be able to capture the messaging and the emotion through the art for this book. And so if you don't mind talking to us just a little bit about your process and even how you approached this particular project.
Yes, I too have a quote. And I've heard it said that if you take something that makes you mad, something that just infuriates you, but then you combine it with a passion or a talent. So it's like a passion / maybe it makes you mad. But you combine it with something that you're good at. And then right there, that's where you find your purpose. And so for me, I absolutely abhor racism and any inequity. It's just, I can't wrap my mind around it. And I always tell my daughter, she's a fierce advocate, that I said, you really, especially with all of what's happened this last couple of years, I said, I guess it's probably good we can't explain. We don't understand, there's some things we don't understand, right? But what we do know is talking about it helps. What we do know is seeing. So my foundation statement for me is everyone should see themselves reflected in art, period. It should be a reflection of the world. Whatever we see in front of us, it should be a beautiful reflection of what we see in real life. This is what real life looks like. So real life should be seen and felt. And so that is the core of what I do. And then another goal for me as an artist is to, I think about it, part of my process is getting people past acceptance. Oh, I accept you, or we accept you. Nobody just wants to be accepted. And I think we've come a long way, and we want to be appreciated. To me, the next step is to get people, to inspire people is a better way to put it, to inspire people towards appreciation. And that's just the next step, because appreciation is great. And because once you learn about someone's culture and you spend time with them and you read a book or you read the behind the scenes about them, or like I have another book here. I know we're toting our book, but I have another book here. I have a whole bunch of diverse books. When you hear about people's stories and you hear about what they've done and their struggles and what they've done amidst amazing struggles, it is a lot harder to hold racism in your heart to them or have hate in your heart to them. People still do it, but it's going to be a lot harder. And then you're really faced with, okay, I realize I'm dealing with racism here because I see they're a human just like me, and they've actually had a lot more hurdles than I had. And they still accomplished something amazing. So just having that access to beautiful work, even if it's just, some of my work is silly and fun, I do comics, but it's just being able to see people with diverse backgrounds just living their life, and that's what it should be. Yeah, did I answer your question? I might go in 3 circles. So I know you're good at bringing us back in.
but I do want to ask you specifically about one of the illustrations in the book. And so, because part of what talking to kids about race does is to reinforce positive affirmations in children, along with helping others understand the differences, people who have differences that are not their own. So when I saw this particular illustration, you captured so many different attributes in one child. And so there's in the book, and we'll get to it later, but it talks about how you can't assume things about a person just based on what they look. And so when I see the illustration and there's darker skin and lighter eyes and even lighter hair, and it's just kind of, it makes it difficult to have judgments based on appearance, because people come just with so many different ones. So if you would not mind, what was kind of your thinking behind this illustration?
I'm always wanting to push myself past what even I initially am thinking. And Anissa and I talked about this, and I'm thinking, like, I think she had black hair to begin with. And I just was like, I want to even switch it up from there, because I've grown up and still know people that have really dark skin and have red hair, natural red hair or blonde hair, and just showing that there's beautiful differences even within, if she's black. We haven't even decided what she is. Is she, Puerto Rican with really beautiful dark skin and she is blonde? I don't know, but just really capturing the beauty of the diversity even within different cultures, and it not being this one specific thing. And again, it just goes back to the core of children seeing themselves. And it's not just children seeing themselves, it's other people and from different backgrounds seeing them being represented. That's every bit as important. So like, let's say that there's some white kids that grew up and all that they see is other white kids in stories, other white kids on TV, whatever. That does a great disservice to them, because when they grow up, it does not prepare them for real life. It does not prepare them for real world circumstances, because aside from living in a bubble, they are going to interact with people of color. And on one end, at best, they will feel shame. And at the other end, it will cultivate hate or racism, because it's just this one viewpoint, and it doesn't prepare them. It doesn't prepare white children for real life circumstances and real life just activities, just working and moving about life. So it's important not just for children themselves to see them represented of all backgrounds, but also for other children on maybe the outside of whatever different culture that is seeing that represented. So that's really, really important for everyone to see that and say, this is normal, a shared experience, this just the rainbow being experienced, that should be the normal thing. It shouldn't necessarily be like this big production. It should just be natural and normal.
Yeah. I can appreciate that, because in my work with my bookshop, part of what inspired me was how Black literature and work written from other people of color was, in some regards, like made to be a challenge. Like to say, like, well, we're gonna read, a book by a Black author for 30 days, or we're gonna read, and I'm like, no. Like, the books can be read all year.
Yeah,
actually not
instead
a
of it being a
challenge.
production,
Yeah.
let's make it
Yeah.
let's make it a normal, beautiful,
Normal.
natural, this is just what we do, you know,
Yeah.
and this is how we celebrate. And I love that a lot of teachers are getting this. And I think I need to just get it for some of the teachers here. My children go to a predominantly white school. And so just being able to get it for, you know, just for to be able to even talk about race. They've had amazing teachers and great experiences, but I think that key point of the freedom and just the verbiage to open the door to talk about it. Like, no, this is not something we shy away from. This is something we celebrate. This is something that we are enjoying and talking about. And it's not a bad thing, because sometimes it gets that taboo, like, oh, this is bad, we can't talk about this. This is important.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And so what we're going to transition into next is that we're going to talk a little bit about the book. And I want to share with the viewers in the audience who are on now and who may watch the webinar in a replay is throughout the conversation about the book, I will ask reflection questions that come directly from the book. And so if you choose to, it would be a great opportunity to think about some questions that you want to pose for the end of the conversation. And so I just wanted to make that point that I'm going to prompt throughout this conversation for the audience. And so in getting into a conversation about the book, so historically speaking, people who benefit the most from racial equity work identify as Black, Indigenous, and Latino, just given the historical context of our country. And so just so that we are creating a bit of a foundation for the book, its purpose, and how it can help, Anissa, I want to come to you. Well, first, before I do that, I want to read something. So in the book, there's an acknowledgement that skin color is only one component of diversity, and that there are many other factors and complexities that perpetrate systemic racism and inequities. This book and the Talking to Kids About Race workshop are designed to spark thinking about this topic and provide an entry point for engaging young children in conversations about race. And so I wanted to share that passage first as we get into the conversation, so that people understand that the book is a tool, and it's not necessarily the one thing that is going to single-handedly dismantle systemic racism and oppression. So in saying that, Anissa, if you can explain a little bit, one, why we should be talking to kids about race. We've touched on it a bit already, but one thing that I got from reading the book is to make sure that I'm separating the difference in talking to a child about race over engaging them in a broader discussion about the implications of racism. So if you can just kind of start there.
Sure. Thanks for that question. Yes, and I think that's super important what you said about the book being a starting point and a tool. And also, just to name the audience, I do want to clarify, because it does have such, whimsical, beautiful illustrations and talking to kids about race. It's not a children's book. So there are many books that are meant to tell stories directly to the child. It really is a book that's for adults and to guide them on how to engage in these conversations. And also, there's lots of books listed in the back as resources that are more for the children audience. But in terms of why this is important, this is some of the research I'm getting into in my program, and even started to get into a little bit in the book. But it's so developmentally natural for children to notice difference. And we have research that shows us that as early as 3 months of age, children are drawn to same race faces. And they can do this by measuring how long they look at different images. And by 6 months, it kind of shifts to be more connected to really focusing on other race faces. But what you see is just even with babies, this is something that they're very naturally doing. This isn't something that's taught. It's just noticing difference. And then as they get older, you start to see even bias by age 3, where it's starting to impact their judgments of others, or selection in friendships, or even self-identity. And so that alone really shows us as adults that these are important conversations to have, because it's not the noticing that's a problem. That's actually very healthy and important. Children are trying to make sense of their world, but it's the meaning that's associated. And we know that embedded in our societal structures, if you say nothing, the messages that are absorbed are about hierarchy, are about valuing certain groups over others, and really kind of perpetuating dominant culture and marginalizing people of color. And so it's super important to have these conversations. And when you think about with children, like you said, Kendra, we're not trying to go in and talk about these very deep concepts and this is what systemic racism is, and you're 2 years old, things like that. But you are talking about noticing differences in yourself, noticing difference in others, and also really focusing on building empathy. That's such a core piece as people, for children to be able to love themselves, all the different features that make them unique, including their skin color, but also recognizing that common humanity in other children, regardless of what they look like. And that's where some of these conversations are focused on at the beginning.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I shared with you in the off conversation how one of my, I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. And in the beginning of the book, he talks about, there's a passage where he talks about race being the child of racism, not the father. And that the issue, he says that hue and hair are old, but it's the idea that hue and hair signify something deeper, and that those attributes can correctly align society. And so it just made me think about that and talking to kids about it at a young age, to whereas if they're learning about it young, maybe the less likely that they will grow up and develop or give it deeper meaning as he writes. And so one of the things you said that is actually going to take us into our next topic is about how children notice differences at a very young age. And so one thing that I want to do to create context around what we're going to talk about next is I'm going to share just a quick 25-second video. And then after it plays, Anissa, we'll come back and then we'll get into a conversation about connections to theory and research about how children do recognize differences. So give me one moment while I put it up.
There's more baby, Nana. There's a black baby here. There's a black baby here, Nana. There's a black baby here. A black baby here. Right there, Nana.
What you got? You want me to put that back up for you?
Grandpa is totally real. Totally.
And so I wanted to share that video. Oh, one moment.
But Claire's bridal weekend.
My YouTube was still going. So, so I wanted to play that video for viewers who are watching to help create a basis for what we're going to talk about next, is the idea that children at a young age, they notice differences and they are fascinated by them. And so when I saw that video, it actually went viral on social media. And there was a lot of commentary among adults of what was happening. And so in the comments, some adults, they wrote things like, children don't recognize race at that age. Someone taught her that. What has the little girl been told for her to be yelling, it's a Black baby here? They must have taught her to be a racist as an infant. So these were comments coming from adults about the observation of the little girl being fascinated by seeing another toddler who looked different from her. So without really knowing exactly what was going on in that video, can you share a little bit about maybe what could have been going on?
Yeah. So I think that that's a really good example of sometimes situations that can catch adults off guard and make them very uncomfortable. I felt discomfort even from the kind of bystander in the video of just like, oh gosh, what do we do? This is kind of a taboo topic maybe, but it also kind of hurts my heart to hear people saying, oh, she was probably taught to be racist as an infant, because even when like you said, we don't know the context, but even as you're looking at her expression, it's not fear. It's not even like judgment or disgust. It seems like interest, curiosity, even excitement. And so I wonder if this particular child may be coming from a very homogeneous context where possibly this is maybe more of, she sees diversity on TV or in books. And so this is a new experience. You know, as you said, we don't know, but that's not wrong to notice. It's really about the meaning. So in this situation, you know, what I think would have been helpful is whoever the caregiver is that she's talking to be able to point that out and affirm it. Yes, you're noticing that this little girl has brown skin. It's a different color than your skin, isn't it? And just really being able to say, yes, you're seeing that, and then take it further to give this little girl her whole set, to be able to say, let's go ask her name, you know, and then even you do see she touches her hair to be able to remind this child, oh, remember, we need to ask before are you noticing those barrettes in her hair? They're really pretty, but you have to ask, like that's her body and you have to ask. So just even getting into consent or things like that, but trying to then create a conversation. What's this little girl's name? Finding things that, oh, it looks like she wants to play with a shopping cart too. And just getting back into that child space and helping this little girl to form a connection with another child, but not having to hush that she's noticing the skin color. Because even just to say, don't say that, gets in her mind, oh, there's something wrong with her Black skin. And that's not the message that you want. You want to be able to address it. You want to be able to normalize it. And you want to be able to then make these other connections to similarity and difference, even with the child in a situation like that.
Yeah. And before we go on, I want to pose a question to the audience to start thinking about. Actually, two questions, because I missed my own cue to ask the first one. But just based on the clip that we saw, and even what Anissa is talking about, how it can create discomfort for adults to be in that position and not necessarily know what to say, or be, you know, just don't know what to say or do. Think about a time when a child commented on race. How did you feel? And what was your nonverbal response? So from the video, the young man who was working with the children, to me, his nonverbal response was to quickly give her a toy, give the Black girl a toy. He just clearly didn't know like what to do or say. And so just start thinking about that. And if you want to comment or reply, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. And so Anissa and also Gloria and Piper, as we move through the conversation with the book, feel free to jump in with your comments and thoughts as well.
Yeah, I had something for you right here. And it was directly, excuse me, from the book that when I was gonna maybe try to find it, but I remember it's when if a child says, like the video, you know, oh, the sky is blue, but you say, nope, the sky is purple. That it can cause distress within the child. It can cause anxiety and distress in them, and it confuses them. Like in our world, we would say, oh, well, we don't see color. You know, I think the thing to address here is that we do see color. We celebrate color. And this book helps open up that conversation of key points on how to do that and how to interact with children, and sometimes really how to interact with ourselves in our adult world. Like, we're seeing color, we're celebrating it. This is not a taboo topic. This is a celebration. And that was the next step for me. Past acceptance towards appreciation. The very next step is celebration. Like, I celebrate you. Like, you guys do that on holidays, or you guys do, this is something that you do. That's why you wrap your hair. Like, I'm obsessed with headdresses, and each different culture has a different reason. It's not always the same thing. And I think that when we know more about people, when we know their stories, when we know the background, instead of saying, oh, no, we don't know anything, we all are the same. So when we tell children we're all the same, as far as complexion and culture goes, first of all, it's not true. And children know that. Intuitively, they know that, because studies have shown it causes them distress and anxiety. And now they're holding it inside of them, and there's no way to express it. And so now they're just frustrated. So we're giving them the freedom to say, like the book is saying, ask them open-ended questions. Ask them, well, what are you noticing? That's unique and that's different and that's beautiful. And really adding on to the end, whatever word that is very similar to beauty, that it is beautiful. And that's, you know, a unique thing. But definitely saying, hey, there are some beautiful differences. There's some unique differences here that are very important to point out, instead of shying away and saying, that's not what it is. Because just like if we were saying, you know, 2 + 2 is 10, that would cause them distress, and it's frustrating. So it's really important to acknowledge those unique differences.
And you know, as I was looking at before the project was still Twinkle in All Our Eyes, I looked at the original book study, and there was an exercise in there, dirt activity, to try and understand which, you know, characteristics about people, you know, change and what stays the same. And that activity was to actually rub dirt on your arm, you know, on different children's arms, and then wash it off. So with the dirt on, everyone was the same color, but then the color is different when you wash it off. And I saw that, and, you know, being Latina and brown skin, it's sort of like, wow, that really is not a good thing to do. And there was also another exercise about getting different colored of apples, and the skin color is different from the inside when you cut them open. So what Anissa has done is, you know, she's written that says that even though people are the same on the inside, sometimes they're still treated differently based on the color of their skin and where they're from or what they believe in. And she goes on to say that it's not right when people are treated differently or badly based on these things. All people deserve to be loved and treated with kindness. When you see someone being treated different or badly, it's important to say that's not right. And you show them kindness by being a good friend. You know, to me, that was such a major change, because when we talk about implicit bias, some of the things that may be normal to someone, so if you're in a predominantly homogeneous environment and everyone looks the same, and a child sees that, when you see someone different, like in the video that we saw, you wonder what they are like inside, maybe, you know, because children get really interesting ideas. So this helps them with that. But using, you know, an exercise that is a lot more respectful is, I thought, was one of the great things about this new edition that Anissa has written.
Yeah. And so kind of staying here a little bit, but shifting to what will be our last topic from the book before we see if there are any questions from the audience. One of which I want to plant is to think about what your earliest memories of talking about race and ethnicity were. I know for me, I actually called my sister and asked her if she recalls. She's 3 years older than I. And I actually remember for myself, my earliest memory of really talking about race was an attribute. It was about my hair, because my closest childhood friend was white, and she wet her hair every day in the shower. And so I went through this phase where I was wetting my hair in the shower, and my grandmother is like, what in the heck? Like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, oh, like, well, Elizabeth does it, so, I do it. And I remember my grandmother saying, well, you're not white. And I'm like, well, I didn't think I was white. Like, she wets her hair, so I'm wetting mine, And that was really one of my earliest memories about having a race conversation as a child with another adult. So to the audience, think about your earliest memories of talking about race and ethnicity. And if you have any comments, feel free to put them in the Q&A. And so one of the last things that I want us to talk about, and this is open for Anissa, Piper, or Gloria. So in the book, it talks about the danger of just ignoring a child's natural interests and differences and things like that. And given that sometimes adults can be misguided around these matters, like in the comments over the video where people automatically assume that the child was taught racism, or believe that a child that young wouldn't notice the difference in color. Who is the book for? If you could create the ultimate way for someone to get the most value out of the book, would it be someone who already is open to conversations and a bit more comfortable talking about race? Or is there a pathway for someone who may not quite be there yet? So that's the question that I want to pose to the panel, is who's the book for?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and people hopefully by now have gotten a sense of how the book is organized, that you have some research in there. You also have scenarios and tools. There's even like scripts and activities. So it really is for adults. And I would say that the main audience that will pick this up and get the most out of it right away are those who are recognizing that this is important and are maybe looking for an entry point that's more focused on the how. So it could be a white parent who is saying, I really want to raise my children with this anti-biased approach and anti-racist just way that they're living, but like, how do I do that? Or for the group or the family who is in context, whether it's neighborhood or school, where there isn't a lot of racial diversity, like what does that look like? And I think that when you're asking those questions, this gives you a really good starting point and a lot of resources. I shared an example when we had talked before. I had worked as a school social worker for a number of years, and in a preschool classroom, there was a little boy who was playing with dolls. And first of all, I love that all the kids play with the dolls. Everybody can take care of babies, right? But he had walked away and he came back, and the doll that he was playing with, someone else had taken, and he was sad. And so I had just pointed out, I was like, oh, there's another baby there on the shelf. And he went over really excited, and he reached in the shelf and picked out the doll. And this doll was a brown skin doll. And before he was playing with a white doll, and he looked at it and he said, ew, not this one. And he threw it to the ground. And he was 4 years old. And I think that's one of the things that we have to think about when we talk about, oh, we're just going to be colorblind, or we're just going to talk about we're all friends, we're all the same, because I don't think people were sitting him down and telling him that brown skin was ugly or bad or undesirable, but he was still absorbing those messages. And so for any adult, whether you're a parent, you're an early educator, you care about kids in your life, a grandparent, if a scenario like that bothers you and you want to be part of reversing it and creating situations where there's this greater understanding and inclusive mindsets from the beginning, I think this book's for you. And if you're also thinking about instilling positive identity in all children, because the research also shows that a positive racial identity, regardless of your background, is connected to well-being. It's connected to good academic outcomes, health outcomes, just your own confidence and self-concept. And so this is important for all children. But I still would say that the book can be relevant even if you're thinking of someone who you think maybe could use it, but they're not quite ready for this conversation. I encourage you to still gift it. As Piper was saying, thinking about even her children's teachers, she might not know exactly their perspective on this. And maybe they would, possibly look at it and be like, oh my gosh, talking to kids about race, like eye roll. But just to look at it, even if it's just kind of skimming through, could plant a seed. And I think that's worth attempting, because this is a really important conversation we need to be having more.
Yeah.
I really like the dedication. It says this book is dedicated to our children who continuously teach us how to be better. So, because if you think about it, they start off all wide-eyed, and it's just by how we talk about things or don't talk about things is how their attitudes are formed. And so this is excellent for either dipping into it or really, really studying. And I think it's for anyone that works with children or is interested in helping children think about where they fit in and where other people fit in.
Yeah. That's a good way to end, Gloria, because one of the last points in the book, guidelines for talking to young children about race. Again, this is one of my favorite. I'm trying to make sure I'm holding it right in the camera. It's weird when you're trying to reverse it. And so in the book behind this illustration, it's a mom acknowledging what her child is recognizing about another child on the playground. And so she says, like, you're right, she has dark brown skin. That is something different about the two of you. I also noticed that she likes to go down the slide just like you. That's something you have in common. Why don't you just ask if she wants to play with you? And so for, adults who are gonna get on this journey, the book is very well laid out between why, research that kind of backs it up, and then exercises and instructions that you can do so you don't have to have all the answers. And so that's what I love most about it. And so if there aren't any more comments from the panel, I want to take the last few minutes before we close to give viewers an opportunity to comment and ask questions.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question from Deborah Johnson, which I think is a brilliant question. Deborah wants to know, what are parents most afraid of in grappling with this topic with their children, and how do you help them get over this concern?
I think in my experience, a lot of that fear or discomfort comes from people still needing to do more of their own work to understand. And that's why even in our resource section for the book, we have lots of materials for children, but we also have suggestions for adults, because you doing your own work first is going to better equip you to guide children. So sometimes it's out of like that discomfort because it's just like, I don't know, or I don't even understand this enough myself. But then I also feel like even when people know it's really important and they maybe even have done some of their own work and they're inspired to engage, they're so afraid of getting it wrong. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to create a bias where there wasn't one. And so it feels daunting and overwhelming to the point where they just choose silence. And so that's one of the things that we tried to approach in this book, is give people some very clear tools. Here's how you can describe describe melanin in a way that a young child would understand. So when they ask the question of, why is her skin different color than his skin? You can be like, oh, I have that. I know that. And so I do think that that's one of the big pieces, at least in most of my experiences. Certainly you have some people that are not in a growth mindset even at all to think that diversity, equity, inclusion are important, and maybe proactively trying to cultivate this dominance with their children. And that's a whole nother group and topic for how we address it. But for a lot of people that do want to do this, I think it's a lack of understanding or a fear of getting it wrong. And we hope that this book can address some of that and help people feel like it's more accessible to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And I just want to speak to something that it's at the end of the book. And I know we're at the last couple minutes, but just give yourself grace. Like we're all in this, like, when we all grew up learning different things, no matter what background we're from, right? And so as you're in this journey, no matter what your background is, give yourself grace, because as you grow, you're going to make mistakes. Like we all will make mistakes as we grow. So making sure that you give yourself grace, and then also take advantage of the resources. There's a ton of resources here. And then sometimes it's just being quiet and listening. Get around people that look different than you and listen. Just be still and listen. Oh, I see there might be another question popping up.
Yeah, I see this question from Christine that's talking about favorite books or resources to engage middle-aged kids about race, like 10, 13, those kinds of things. And one of the things that I love for that approach, there's so many books, there's so much good literature, but one of the things that I think is really important for that age is to create awareness and familiarity with the history of resistance. I think that middle school and that middle childhood age is really kind of like into the action and what did people do. And you have so many examples you can pull from history, but also real time today. And this also provides an opportunity where you can find ways for everyone to see themselves. Yes, we have many, many examples of people of color who fought back, who stood up, who said that this is not going to be something that we're going to tolerate, but you also have people who identify as white or Euro-American background. And I think that's really important, especially in these middle years when sometimes people who identify as white can start to feel like guilt or shame even about their whiteness. And so as they're being, everybody's racialized in different ways, but to still see, yes, although your circumstances and advantages may be different than other people based on what you look like, this wasn't your idea. We have a history for as long as this was an issue of people from all backgrounds that fought for justice and pushed back against what wasn't fair. And that's something that not only you can do, but we all collectively have a responsibility to do. So I really think focusing on that is a great way to engage with that age group.
And if I'm not mistaken, I know Kendra also, or maybe you guys as a group, put together a wonderful list of books as well, to help with that as well. And I think that's just a wonderful way to get kids engaged in the topic. Yes, perfect. Kendra dropped the link in the chat. So be sure to check that out. You guys reaffirmed a lot of things as I'm on this journey. I've got 2 young kids. I've got an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old. Race and diversity in general was not a topic in my childhood. And so now I'm bringing them up in a more diverse world. And especially over the last few years where, exactly as Piper mentioned, the anger started building and I needed to find a creative outlet to integrate them. And I found the best way to do it is to do what I can where I'm at. And this is where I'm at. And so we do what we can. And always afraid of getting it wrong, but just taking the next best step. That's all I can say. I want to thank.
Can I just add too really quick, Samantha? I just want to give a shout out to Sarah Salguera, who was she created the original workbook, and some of her content did carry over. So I just want to acknowledge her. And also there were content contributors who gave feedback on the book, who read it over, who gave suggested activities and additions, and all of their names are listed in there. But I just want to make sure that it's mentioned that this was a collaborative effort and we had an amazing team that helped put this together.
It's a wonderful book and you should be all very proud of it. And I hope everyone watching gets a copy for themselves and as a gift, because books make great gifts, especially this one. So thank you, Kendra. Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, Piper and Gloria, for this wonderful panel this evening. I hope everyone had a wonderful night and has some things to walk away with and think about, and go out there and talk to your kids. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you so much. I'm going to give you a clap because you can't hear all the claps. And we hope to have you in store, ladies, soon. And have a wonderful night, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.